In the middle of a blinding snowstorm, a lost German shepherd curls around a child, shielding her with nothing but her own fragile body. Hours pass, the wind rages, and the dog's strength begins to fade, yet she refuses to move. When rescuers finally arrive, they discover not only the girl, but also a secret hidden beneath the shepherd's fur that changes everything. What drives a dog to risk it all for a stranger's child? Watch until the end to uncover the extraordinary truth. The sky was heavy and gray that morning. Snow kept falling layer upon layer until the park looked more like a blank sheet than a place where people used to walk their dogs or jog on warmer days. Every bench was buried, every path lost under the thick white cover. The trees stood stiff and silent, their branches drooping under the weight of ice. It was the kind of day when most people stayed indoors close to heaters with warm drinks in their hands. But Alex and Ethan had chosen to step outside. They had been roommates for years, and when one suggested a walk, the other usually agreed without thinking too much. Even on a day like this, when the wind cut at their faces and the air seemed too sharp to breathe, the habit pulled them out of the apartment. "A little walk won't hurt, Alex," had said with a shrug. Ethan had nodded, pulling on his thick coat and wrapping a scarf twice around his neck. The park was nearly empty. Their boots crunched into the snow with each step, the sound too loud in the stillness. The air smelled of pine and cold metal. Every time they spoke, their words came out in white clouds, quickly carried away by the wind. "This is crazy," Alex muttered, tightening his coat. "No one else is out here." "That's what makes it nice," Ethan replied, though his voice wavered. His cheeks were already red from the cold. The two friends kept moving. They followed a path that wasn't really there anymore, only guessed at from memory, a faint line between the trees. The snow was deep enough that they had to lift their legs higher with each step, and after a while, their bodies ached from the effort. Alex pushed his hands deep into his pockets. "We'll go around once and head back," he said. "Fine by me," Ethan answered. They had walked almost halfway when Alex slowed down. He thought he had heard something faint, softer than the wind. He turned his head, listening, but heard only silence. He shook it off and kept walking. Then it came again. A sound, small and thin, carried between the trees. Ethan stopped too, his breath hanging in the air. "Did you hear that?" he asked quietly. Alex nodded. This time it was clearer. A whimper. Not human, not the creak of branches. Something alive. The cold air suddenly felt sharper. Ethan's chest tightened. He had volunteered at animal shelters before, and the sound struck a chord in him. "That's a dog," he said. "It has to be. Out here. In this weather?" Alex frowned, scanning the whiteness. The park was still and endless. The noise came again a little longer this time. Both men looked toward a cluster of trees, where the snow seemed deeper, undisturbed by any recent footprints. Ethan's stomach nodded. "We need to check." They left the faint path and trudged through thicker snow. Each step sank them almost to the knees. The cold bit harder the closer they came to the trees, as if the silence itself carried weight. The sound grew clearer, a weak cry almost swallowed by the wind. The trees blocked some of the snow, but the ground here was uneven, covered in ridges of white. Alex's heart beat faster. Something about the sound was wrong. It was too soft, too tired. "What if it's hurt?" he said under his breath. "Then we get it help," Ethan replied, pushing forward. They moved slowly, careful not to scare whatever was hidden there. The snow under their boots cracked with every step, too loud in the stillness. When they reached the largest tree, they stopped. Something small was curled at its base, half buried in snow. At first it looked like just another mound, the kind the wind made when it blew against tree trunks. But then it shivered. Alex's chest tightened. He crouched, brushing snow away with his gloved hands. The shape became clearer, fur-long, and tangled, pressed flat under frost. A dog curled tight as if trying to disappear into itself. Its body trembled weakly, and its breaths were shallow. The fur was dusted white with ice, and patches of skin showed through where the coat had thinned. "God," Alex whispered. Ethan knelt beside him, eyes wide. He reached out a hand, but pulled it back, afraid to startle the creature. The dog didn't move. It didn't even lift its head. It was as if all strength had left it. "This isn't right," Ethan said softly. Alex leaned closer. His breath fogged over the dog's face. He could see the frost caught in its whiskers, the dull glaze of its closed eyes. "It's alive," he said, his voice shaking. "Barely." And then he heard something else. A different sound. A softer whimper muffled under the dog's body. Alex froze. He looked at Ethan, who had heard it too. Together they leaned closer, brushing more snow away. What they saw made both of them stop breathing. There, tucked against the dog's belly, were smaller shapes. 3 tiny bodies pressed together so tightly it was hard to tell them apart at first. Puppies. Their fur was wet and clumped, their eyes shut tight, their little sides rising and falling with uneven breaths. Ethan's throat closed. "She's shielding them," he said, almost in awe. But before Alex could reply, he saw something else. Just behind the circle of fur, another shape, longer, thinner, barely visible under the snow. He brushed the flakes away with trembling hands. A small arm. A sleeve. Ethan Alex's voice cracked. Together they cleared more snow. And there she was. A little girl no older than 10, lying still, her face pale as the snow around her. Her lips were bluish, her body stiff. She had thin gloves, a small coat, boots that looked soaked through. She was nestled so close to the dog that it was clear the animal had been keeping her warm, shielding her as much as it could. Alex's vision blurred. "Oh my God." Ethan's hands shook. He touched the girl's shoulder gently. Hey, can you hear me?" His voice was desperate but soft, afraid of breaking her. No answer. The dog lifted its head at last, weak but alert, its eyes dull yet steady. It looked at them, then back at the girl as if to say, "Don't take her away. Protect her." Alex swallowed hard. His whole body trembled now, and it wasn't just from the cold. They had come out for a walk, nothing more. And now they were staring at a scene they could hardly believe: a dying dog, 3 tiny puppies, and a child clinging to life under their protection. The snow kept falling soft and endless. The wind whispered through the trees. And somewhere deep inside both men, the quiet realization struck. This was no ordinary walk. This was the start of something they would never forget. Ethan met Alex's eyes. Both saw the same thing reflected there. Fear, urgency, but also a spark of resolve. "We have to move," Alex whispered. The faint cry of one of the puppies rose again, thin and sharp, in the freezing air. It was as if the little creature was calling them to act, to hurry, to save them all, before the snow swallowed every sound for good. The sound lingered in the air, weak yet sharp, pulling Alex and Ethan forward. Each step sank their boots deeper into the snow. Each breath felt heavier in their lungs. The park had gone from silent to threatening. It was no longer just a winter landscape. It felt like a stage holding its breath. The faint cry came again. Ethan tilted his head, his eyes narrowing, trying to lock onto its direction. "It's close," he whispered. His voice trembled not only from the cold. Alex scanned the whiteness. Everything looked the same. Snow piled against tree trunks, soft ridges spreading like waves, no footprints but their own. Still, the sound cut through it all, guiding them like a fragile thread. They moved toward a tall cluster of oaks. Snow clung thick to the bark. Wind swept through the branches, rattling frozen twigs. Every crunch of their boots made the hidden whimper sound even smaller. Alex raised a hand, signaling Ethan to slow down. His heart pounded as if he were stepping into the unknown. "Careful," he murmured. Then they saw it. At the base of the largest tree, curled into a ball, lay a dog. Its body was trembling, covered in frost ribs, faintly showing through patches of thin fur. The animal looked almost part of the snow itself until its chest rose weakly. Ethan froze. Oh no. Alex crouched low, eyes wide. He brushed the snow from the dog's back. The animal stirred but didn't lift its head. Its ears twitched once, then drooped again. "She's barely hanging on," Alex said, his voice cracking. The dog let out a faint, raspy sound. Then the men noticed something more. Beneath the curve of her body, smaller shapes pressed tightly against her belly. Ethan reached out, brushing snow aside. His hand stopped midair. "Puppies," he whispered. 3 tiny figures, their fur damp and clumped, their bodies trembling, clung to the warmth of the larger dog. They whimpered softly, the fragile sound that had first drawn the men here. But there was still more. Alex leaned closer and froze in shock. Just beyond the circle of fur pressed against the dog, as if she were a shield, was another body. He pushed snow away quickly, hands shaking. A child's face appeared, pale lips, tinged blue lashes frosted with ice. She looked no older than 10. Alex's throat tightened. "Ethan, she's a little girl." Ethan's stomach dropped. He kneeled on the other side, brushing more snow off her coat. The girl's chest rose shallowly, barely visible. She was unconscious, her head tucked into the dog's side, as if she had been trying to disappear into warmth. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The only sounds were the hiss of falling snow and the weak cries of the puppies. Ethan finally broke the silence. "She's keeping them alive. All of them. She's been using her own body to shield them." The reality hit like a punch. A dog, weak and starving, had given everything it had to protect not just her own pups, but a human child. Alex's eyes stung. How long have they been out here? His voice was more to himself than anyone. The dog, Bella, though they didn't know her name yet, lifted her head slightly. Her eyes were dull, but steady, focused on the men. She didn't growl, didn't move to attack. She only looked at them, then back at the girl, as if to say, "She comes first." Ethan pressed 2 fingers gently against the girl's wrist. For a second, fear clenched his chest. Then he felt it, a faint, slow pulse. "She's alive," he whispered. Relief flooded him, mixed with urgency. Alex leaned closer, checking the puppies. One shivered hard, another whimpered weakly, and the smallest lay frighteningly still. "They're freezing," he said. His own hands felt clumsy in his gloves, but he tucked them around the puppies, trying to give a little warmth. Ethan's breath came fast. His mind raced. He had seen stray dogs in bad condition, but never like this. Never with a child involved. The snow kept falling around them, covering the scene like a cruel blanket. Every second felt heavier. The girl's face grew paler, her lips darker. The puppy's cries weakened. Alex looked at Ethan, his voice low but firm. "We have to move them. Now." Ethan nodded, but his eyes stayed locked on the dog, who seemed too weak to even stand. Her body shook as she tried to adjust, pressing closer to the girl, refusing to leave her side. "She won't survive if we just carry the girl and leave her," Ethan said. "We take them all. Every one of them." Alex hesitated. The idea of lifting them all through the deep snow felt impossible. But one look at the scene erased his doubt. He swallowed hard and nodded. Together they worked quickly. Alex slid his arms under the girl's small body. She was stiff, icy cold, lighter than he expected. He cradled her carefully against his chest, shielding her from the wind. Ethan reached for the puppies. He scooped them into his scarf, wrapping it around them like a sling. The smallest one barely moved its body limp. Ethan pressed it close to his chest under his coat, hoping his own warmth might keep it alive. Finally, they turned back to the dog. She tried to push herself up her legs, trembling, but collapsed again. She looked at them with a tired determination, as if begging them not to leave her behind. Ethan's heart twisted. "Come on, girl," he whispered. He slid his arms under her too, grunting at the weight. She was heavier than she looked, her body limp with exhaustion. For a moment, both men stood there, loaded with more than they thought they could carry, Alex holding the unconscious child. Ethan burdened with a dying dog and 3 tiny lives. The snowstorm swirled around them, biting into their skin, filling the silence with its endless hiss. Alex adjusted his grip on the girl, looking at Ethan. Their eyes met, both wide with fear, both burning with the same resolve. "We're getting them out," Alex said firmly. Ethan nodded, clutching the puppies tighter against his chest. No matter what. And with that, they turned back toward the path they had left behind, every step slow and heavy, every breath a promise that none of those lives would be left in the snow. Behind them, the tree stood silent again, its base now empty. The strange sign they had followed into the whiteness had revealed more than either of them could have imagined. Not just a lost dog, but a mother, her young, and a child, all bound together by the will to survive. The storm howled, the world still white and endless. But inside the 2 men, something shifted. The weight they carried was crushing, but also sacred. They weren't just walking back anymore. They were carrying a miracle. The snow kept falling, each flake settling into silence, as if the world wanted to bury the scene before Alex and Ethan could even understand it. The storm had swallowed the park whole. No paths, no colors, no signs of life, only the fragile circle at the base of the oak tree, a circle made of fur and breath and desperate love. Bella, the mother dog, had drawn her body around the girl, and her 3 pups creating a wall against the cold. Her frame was thin ribs showing beneath her coat, but she pressed herself tight to the child, as if she were a blanket stitched by instinct. The puppies burrowed between Bella's belly and the little girl's arms, their tiny bodies shivering, their faint cries muffled against her chest. Alex knelt in the snow, his knees going numb, but he didn't notice. His eyes fixed on the way the girl's hand, pale and stiff, rested against Bella's fur. It looked like she had fallen asleep, clutching the warmth, refusing to let go, even as her body weakened. "This is unreal," Alex whispered. His voice barely carried over the wind. Ethan crouched beside him, his breath uneven. She kept them alive. Look at them. Without her, they'd all be gone. The girl's face was ghostly. Her eyelashes were frozen clumps, her lips bluish and cracked. Each breath she took was shallow, as if it might stop at any moment. Alex leaned closer, panic rising in his chest. "She's so cold." He slipped his glove off and pressed 2 fingers to her neck. For a terrifying moment, he felt nothing. Then faint. A slow, fragile pulse. "She's still with us," he said, relief and fear crashing together. The puppies stirred weakly at the sound of his voice. One let out a squeak so thin it barely rose above the wind. Another tried to nuzzle deeper into the girl's coat. The third was frighteningly still, its little body pressed flat against Bella's chest. Ethan's throat tightened. He reached out, lifting the small pup gently in his palms. Its body was icy, unmoving. He cupped it against his own chest, covering it with his scarf. "Hang on, little one," he murmured, voice trembling. Bella shifted slightly, her head lifting a fraction. Her eyes opened dull, but filled with something that made Ethan stop. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't even fear. It was a plea. She looked at them, then at the girl, then back, as if to say, "Don't take her warmth away. Help her." But don't break the circle. Alex swallowed hard, unable to breathe for a moment. She's telling us what matters, he said. Ethan nodded. The girl first. The storm howled through the branches. Snow pressed harder, biting their cheeks, stinging their eyes. Yet inside the circle there was a fragile glow, a pocket of life that had held out against the storm longer than it should have. Alex bent close, speaking softly near the girl's ear. "Hey, sweetheart, can you hear me?" He kept his tone gentle, steady, though his hands shook. "We're here now. You're going to be okay." The girl didn't stir. Her eyelids fluttered once, but stayed closed. Alex's chest tightened. "She's slipping. We can't waste time." Ethan rubbed the puppy tucked into his scarf, trying to coax movement. He glanced at Bella again. The dog's breaths came harsh and shallow, her sides rising and falling with effort. Her muzzle rested on the girl's shoulder, as if she refused to move even an inch. Bella. Ethan didn't know why the name came to him, but it fit. He reached out carefully, touching her fur. She flinched, but didn't pull away. Her body trembled under his hand, her muscles twitching with exhaustion. "She's done everything she can," Ethan whispered. "If we don't act now, they'll all—" He stopped himself. Alex clenched his jaw. The fear pressed down like the snow itself, heavy and endless. The child's weak pulse, the puppy's cries fading, the dog's labored breath, it all balanced on a knife edge. For a moment, silence fell again, broken only by the storm. The two men looked at each other, their faces, pale eyes wide, every line of their bodies screaming the same truth. This was life or death. Alex leaned closer, his lips near the girl's ear. "Stay with us. Don't give up now." He brushed snow from her hair, his gloveless hand trembling from both cold and desperation. "Help is coming." Ethan's heart pounded as he tried again to rouse the pup against his chest. Slowly, so slowly, the tiniest twitch of movement came. A faint breath fogged against his coat. Relief nearly knocked him to the ground. "She moved," he whispered hoarsely. "She's still here." Alex exhaled sharply, holding the girl tighter. The storm swirled around them, yet the fragile circle at the base of the oak tree still held. Bella's eyes closed for a moment, her body sagging, but she forced them open again. She looked once more at Alex and Ethan. This time her gaze was clear. Not just to plead trust. She was handing them her circle, placing it in their hands. Alex's chest ached at the weight of it. He nodded to Ethan. "We're not leaving anyone behind." The words carried into the snow steady and sure, as if he had spoken a vow. And with that vow, the fragile circle of warmth became something more than instinct. It became a bond between a girl, a mother dog, 3 tiny pups, and 2 strangers who had stumbled into the storm at the right moment. Life clung to life, breath clung to breath. And in that frozen park, the line between survival and loss thinned to the width of a snowflake. The storm pressed harder, as if testing their resolve. But Alex and Ethan had already decided. No matter how heavy the snow, no matter how weak the lives in their arms, they would carry the circle out of the cold. And the moment they moved the first step through the deep snow with all that weight against their chests, the circle shifted. But it did not break. It grew. Alex tightened his grip around the girl's small body, as if he could hold her soul in place by sheer force. She was so light in his arms that it felt wrong, unreal, like carrying air wrapped in cloth. A child should have weight, should press into his arms with life and warmth. But she was as weightless as a bundle of frozen branches. Her coat was stiff with frozen snow, her gloves soaked through and brittle with ice. He pressed her closer to his chest, desperate to share even the faintest warmth left in his body. Her cheek brushed against him, hard and icy, the touch so cold it burned. Alex bent his head low until his ear hovered above her lips, desperate for proof. For a heartbeat, he thought there was nothing, and panic spiked through him like a knife. Then faint as a whisper there, it was breath. Weak, shallow, slipping in and out, a fragile rhythm that seemed ready to vanish if the storm pushed just a little harder. The wind roared through the trees as though it might snatch that breath away at any second. "Stay with me," Alex whispered his words, breaking in the cold air. His voice came out as shaky clouds of steam disappearing the moment they left his lips. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second, forcing calm, then opened them again. Sharper now, focused only on the tiny life in his arms. Beside him, Ethan knelt in the snow, moving quickly, but with hands that trembled from both cold and fear. He reached down and gathered the puppies huddled against their mother. Two of them whimpered faintly. When he touched them, their bodies quivering as if begging for shelter. Ethan cradled them against his scarf, tucking the fabric around them, like a nest, his breath coming heavy as he secured them close. Their small bodies twitched and pressed into one another, searching for heat, for a heartbeat to cling to. But the third one did not move. Ethan's stomach dropped, a hollow weight dragging him down. He lifted the last pup into his gloved hands. The body was limp, light as a leaf, eyes sealed shut, as if frozen in sleep. Its chest was still so still that Ethan had to hold his breath to be sure. He waited, counting seconds, willing the rise and fall to appear. Nothing. The storm raged around him, but inside his head there was only silence, a silence so loud it deafened him. "No, no, no." He muttered the words raw and low. He shook his head quickly, as if denial could pull life back into the small body. His breath fogged in quick bursts, panic pushing through his veins. He tore one glove off with his teeth, exposing his skin to the freezing air. Pain bit instantly, but he didn't care. He pressed his bare hand against the pup's chest, desperate for even the faintest flutter beneath his palm. For a moment he imagined it prayed for it, but there was nothing. His hand burned from the cold, but the pup felt colder still, like ice molded into the shape of life. Alex glanced over, panic flashing in his eyes. He shifted the girl higher against his chest, tightening his hold. "Ethan." His voice cracked with fear, one word carrying the weight of everything he couldn't say. Ethan met his gaze, throat-tight lips trembling. "This one's... he's fading." The words were heavy stone in his mouth, dragging him down into despair. Saying them felt like surrender, and he couldn't accept that. He looked down at the puppy again, anger and desperation mixing into something fierce. Not here. Not like this. He pushed the tiny body against his chest, shoving it beneath his coat until it lay against his bare skin. The shock of the icy body made him flinch, a gasp tearing from his throat, but he held it tighter, refusing to let go. "Come on, little guy," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Don't quit now. Fight." His words shook, but they carried every ounce of strength he had left, every prayer he had never spoken out loud. Snow whipped across his face, sharp as glass, slicing his cheeks and stinging his eyes. His teeth clenched as he cupped his hands over the pup, forming a cage of warmth with his body. He bowed his head, pressing his chin close, trying to trap every bit of heat he could. His own heartbeat pounded under his ribs, heavy and insistent, as if begging the smaller heart to join in, to rise and fall in rhythm. Each thud echoed in his ears, each thud a call. Live. 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 Time felt warped, stretched thin. Seconds dragged like minutes. The storm raged, but all Ethan could feel was the stillness against his chest. He rocked slightly, murmuring into the wind, whispering broken words like spells. "Stay. Breathe. Don't stop now." Alex watched with wide eyes, torn between holding the girl and helping his friend. His arms tightened around the child, feeling her faint breaths slipping weaker against him. He bent lower, pressing his lips close to her frozen ear. "Stay with me too," he begged softly. His voice trembled as much as Ethan's, each word forced through clenched teeth. Don't give up, sweetheart. Please. Two men in the storm, each clutching fragile lives against their hearts, each bargaining with the cold, each refusing to accept loss. The girl's shallow breaths brushed against Alex's chest like fading whispers. The pup lay still against Ethan, a frozen weight pressed to his skin. But both men refused to surrender. They hunched their bodies against the storm, turning themselves into shields, burning whatever warmth remained in their own blood to feed the smaller lives they carried. The world around them was white, merciless, endless. The wind howled through the branches as though mocking their struggle. But inside that circle, inside those desperate arms, hope still pulsed. Fragile, faint, but alive. Ethan pressed harder, rocking the pup gently. "Feel my heartbeat," he whispered. "Take it. Make it yours." His chest burned from the cold, but he pressed closer still, as if his heart could leap from his ribs and spark the smaller one awake. And then something. A twitch. So small he thought he imagined it. Ethan froze, his eyes snapping open wide. He held his breath, waiting, praying. A second passed. Then another. A flutter. The faintest rise and fall beneath his hand. A breath. The pup's chest moved, shallow but real. Ethan's eyes filled with tears, his throat closing. A broken laugh escaped him, half sob, half relief. Yes, that's it. Stay with me." He pressed his lips against the top of the pup's head, whispering fiercely into the storm. "You fight, little one. You fight." The storm still raged, but something had shifted. Against all odds, in the middle of a frozen park, life had stirred again. And Ethan held it tight, refusing to let go. Beside him, Bella let out a weak whine. The sound was soft, thin, like a thread ready to snap. She tried to lift her head once more, but her strength failed almost at once, and she sagged against the snow as if the earth itself was pulling her down. Her ribs shuddered with each breath. Her eyes, dull but stubborn, flicked toward Ethan, then toward the child in Alex's arms. There was meaning in that glance. It said the struggle wasn't over. It said, "Don't stop. Carry us through." Alex staggered upright, his boots sinking deep, snow pouring over the tops. He adjusted his hold on the girl, tucking her closer, as if to shield her from the storm itself. Her face rested against his chest, too, still too pale. The cold seemed to crawl from her body into his, numbing his heart. He felt her shallow breath, weak as cobweb, and his jaw tightened. "We've got to move." Now he said, his voice rough. Ethan nodded, but his knees stayed buried in the snow. He bowed his head lower, pressing his lips near the tiny pup's ear. His words came out in a hushed chant, broken and steady at once. "Breathe. Please breathe." He said it again and again, as though the repetition alone might keep the spark from dying. His forehead nearly touched the pup's damp fur. Then movement, so faint that Ethan froze, afraid he had imagined it. But there it was, again, a twitch, a flicker of life. His breath caught. He pressed the pup tighter against his skin, straining to feel every shift. The chest, small and fragile, rose just a fraction. A puff of air warm against his skin, fragile but real. Relief flooded him so fast his knees almost gave way. He bit down hard, choking back a sob. Yes, that's it," he whispered, voice breaking into the wind. "Stay with me. Don't stop now." His hands worked quickly, wrapping his scarf tighter around the three pups, pulling the weaker one close between the two stronger siblings so their warmth circled together. He tucked the bundle against his chest, his body forming a shield. His coat sagged heavy with snow, but he didn't care. At his side, Bella lay motionless, her flank barely rising. Ethan bent low, sliding his arms under her frame. She was heavier than she looked, a weight full of exhaustion. For a moment he thought his strength would fail him. But he shifted, gritted his teeth, and pulled her up against him. Every muscle burned, yet he held on. Snow swirled thicker, the air alive with white knives. The wind screamed through the trees, drowning every sound but their breaths. The path back was gone, erased. It was as if the storm wanted to trap them here forever. But Alex and Ethan didn't look back. They couldn't. "Ready." Alex called, his voice hoarse, half drowned by the gale. Ethan raised his head. Frost clung to his lashes, his cheeks raw with cold, but his eyes burned with fierce light. He nodded. "Let's go." They staggered forward, bodies bent against the storm. One carried a child who clung to life by a thread. The other carried a mother who had nearly given her last breath, and three tiny creatures balanced between this world and the next. The weight was crushing. The snow clutched at their legs, dragging them down. The cold sliced into their bones. But each step was fueled by something stronger than fear, resolve. Alex pressed his cheek against the girl's hair, whispering again and again, words spilling like lifelines into the frozen air. "Hold on. Just hold on. Don't leave me." He imagined her hearing him somewhere far away, hearing the rhythm of his heart clinging to the sound like a rope pulled through the dark. Ethan pressed the weak pup tighter, feeling the faint breaths warming his skin. With every step he repeated his mantra. "Breathe. Live. Please." Each word struck the storm like a hammer, steady, relentless, a promise carved into the night. He imagined the pup's tiny heart listening, trying to match his beat. The storm howled louder, a beast circling them, daring them to fall. Snow piled on their shoulders, ice clung to their clothes. Their feet sank deep as though the ground wanted to trap them. Their lungs ached, burning with each drag of frozen air. But they moved. Step by step, they moved. Alex glanced once at Ethan, saw the bundle pressed to his chest, the dog sagging heavy in his arms, and knew his friend was at the edge. But Ethan's face was set, his jaw locked. There was no giving up there. None of them get left behind. Alex set his voice low, but firm. "Not one," Ethan answered, breathless. Together they pushed on. The first struggle had begun, not just against the snow, not just against the storm, but against time itself. Every second mattered. Every step carried the weight of lives too fragile to walk on their own. The world was white and merciless, but in the arms of two men staggered something stronger. Hope. And they refused to let it slip away. The storm hadn't eased by the time help arrived. It came as flashing lights cutting through the white curtain, the muted wail of a siren fighting against the roar of the wind. Alex and Ethan almost collapsed when they saw the ambulance pushing through the snow, headlights glowing like two suns breaking into their nightmare. The paramedics rushed out, their figures bulky in heavy jackets, faces shielded by scarves. One man carried a stretcher, another clutched a medical bag. Snow whipped around them as they sprinted the last stretch. Alex staggered forward, the child limp in his arms, his voice cracking as he called out, "Over here! She's freezing! She's not waking up!" The paramedics didn't waste a second. They eased the girl from Alex's grip, laying her carefully onto the stretcher. One of them slid a small mask over her mouth, squeezing air into her lungs, while another wrapped heated packs around her chest and sides. Her body looked tiny against the stark white sheets. Alex stumbled after them as they pushed the stretcher back toward the ambulance. His breath was ragged, his hands shaking with cold and fear. For a moment, he looked over his shoulder at Ethan, who still knelt in the snow cradling Bella and the three pups. Their eyes met, two lives split in different directions. "Go with her," Ethan said hoarsely. His voice was shredded by wind, but firm. "She needs you there." "And you," Alex shouted back, torn. "I'll get them to a vet. We don't let any of them die tonight." Not one. It wasn't a choice. It was a vow. Alex gave a hard nod. He climbed into the ambulance, grabbing the rail beside the stretcher as the doors slammed shut behind him. The siren wailed louder, pulling them into the night. Inside the ambulance, the world narrowed to flashing red lights and the steady hands of the paramedics. Alex crouched close, clutching the rail, watching as they worked over the little girl. "Pulse is weak, core temperature dangerously low," one medic said quickly. "Get her warmed fast. She's on the edge." Another replied, pulling blankets over her and slipping a line into her tiny arm. Alex leaned closer, whispering into her ear again, even though she couldn't hear. "Hold on, sweetheart. You're almost there. Just a little longer." At the hospital, the doors burst open, and a team of doctors swept the stretcher inside. Alex followed his legs, unsteady. The air inside was sharp with antiseptic bright lights reflecting off white walls. Nurses hurried machines, beeped heated blankets, and warm IV fluids surrounded the girl's body. Alex stood back, helpless. He felt like a man watching a fragile flame flicker in the wind, praying it wouldn't go out. One nurse placed a hand on his shoulder. "She's critical," she said softly, "but she's here in time. We'll fight for her." He nodded, unable to form words. Back in the storm, Ethan bent under his burden. Bella sagged in his arms, her body heavy with exhaustion, her breathing shallow. The three pups pressed against his chest, wrapped in his scarf, their whimpers muffled by fabric. Each step through the snow was agony, his muscles screaming, his lungs burning. The streets were nearly empty. Cars were buried, houses sealed shut, only a few lamps casting pale circles of light into the night. Ethan's boots slipped on the icy road as he forced himself forward. He glanced down again and again, checking the pup he had nearly lost. Its tiny chest rose and fell now, faint but steady. "Good," he whispered, breath breaking. "Stay with me. All of you, just stay." When he finally reached the animal clinic, he nearly collapsed against the glass door. He banged with his fist, shouting, "Help! Please, I've got injured dogs." The door opened, and a veterinarian hurried him inside. The warmth of the room wrapped around him almost too much after the biting cold. He sank to his knees as staff rushed forward, taking Bella from his arms, lifting the bundle of pups from his chest. "What happened?" the vet asked sharply. "Found them in the park. They were freezing with a little girl. The mother, she kept them alive." Ethan's voice cracked. He clutched at his chest as though still holding them. "Get warm fluids, heating pads, oxygen ready," the vet ordered. "We'll do everything we can." Ethan staggered into a chair, watching with blurred vision as they worked. Bella was laid on a table, her body hooked to IV lines. The pups were nestled in small heated boxes, their tiny sides moving with fragile breaths. Staff moved fast, voices calm but urgent. At the same time in the hospital, the fight for the girl's life raged. Doctors monitored her vital signs, warming her blood with machines checking her organs one by one. Her skin was pale but slowly regaining color. "She's young," one doctor said to another. "That gives us a chance." Alex stood at the foot of the bed, silent tears burning his frozen cheeks. Every time her chest rose under the oxygen mask, he whispered, "That's it. Just like that." Back at the clinic, Ethan sat with his head in his hands, refusing to close his eyes. Every whimper from the pups pulled his gaze up. He leaned close to the heated box, where the smallest lay barely moving. "Fight, little one," he whispered again. His voice was worn raw, but steady. Bella stirred weakly on the table. Her eyes opened just a crack, finding Ethan. He leaned forward quickly, his breath catching. "You held on," he said softly. "Now let them help you. You're safe." Hours passed in a blur. In the hospital, Alex finally saw the girl's color return, her breathing strengthen under the machine's rhythm. A nurse smiled faintly. "She's stable," she said. "We're not out of the woods, but she's stable." Relief hit Alex so hard his knees gave out. He sat heavily in a chair, covering his face with his hands, whispering thanks into the quiet. At the clinic, Ethan's vigil stretched through the night. One by one, the pups gained strength, their tiny movements growing more certain. The weakest opened its eyes for the first time, blinking at the warm light. Ethan laughed through tears, pressing a hand against the glass. Bella's breathing steadied. She lifted her head, at last looking toward her pups. When they whined, she let out a faint sound in return. The staff smiled, shaking their heads in wonder. "You brought them just in time," the vet told Ethan. Another hour and they'd all be gone. Ethan leaned back, exhaustion crashing over him, but he smiled through it. Not tonight. Not after what she did for them. At dawn, 2 different buildings held 2 different battles won. In one, a child lay wrapped in warm blankets, machine steady beside her, doctors speaking in calm voices now, instead of urgent ones. Alex sat near her bed, eyes heavy but full of hope. In another, a mother dog lay surrounded by her pups, all alive, their tiny bodies curled close under warm lamps. Ethan sat nearby, slouched in a chair, his face pale with fatigue, but his heart lighter than it had been all night. They had split the fight, one for the girl, one for the animals. And against the storm, against the cold, against time itself, they had won, at least for now. Both men sat in different rooms, miles apart, unaware of each other's exact state, but bound by the same promise. None of them had been left behind. The world split that night. On one side of the city, a hospital's bright halls rang with urgency. On the other, a small clinic glowed faintly against the snow, its lights burning through the storm, like a beacon for creatures who could not speak their pain. 2 battlegrounds, 2 sets of lives hanging by threads, tied together by the choices Alex and Ethan had made. The doors swung wide as the ambulance burst into the emergency bay. A wave of warm air hit Alex's frozen face as he followed the stretcher inside his boots, squeaking on the tiled floor. The girl's small frame looked swallowed by blankets and tubes. Nurses rushed her down a corridor, voices sharp but steady, trading words. Alex barely caught. "Hypothermia, core temp at 25. Get the warming machine ready. Pulse irregular. Keep her airway secure." Alex stumbled alongside until a nurse held out her hand. "Sir, you'll need to wait here." He froze at the edge of the doors, watching them wheel her away. His heart thudded so loud he could hear it in his ears. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was her pale hand slipping limply from under a blanket. Inside, the doctors moved fast. Heated IV fluids were prepared, bags hung above her bed, tubes taped carefully to her tiny arms. A machine hummed as it began to circulate her blood through warm coils, pushing it back into her body degree by degree. "Get the heated blankets. Check vitals every 2 minutes." One nurse rubbed her arms briskly, trying to coax warmth into stiff limbs. Another removed her wet gloves and boots, replacing them with dry coverings. Sensors were clipped to her fingers, alarms beeping faintly. Her chest rose shallowly under the oxygen mask. The monitor showed her heartbeat, faltering, skipping beats. The lead doctor leaned closer, eyes sharp. "We need her body temp higher. She's slipping." For a moment, the flat line between life and loss felt terrifyingly close. But slowly, the warmth spread. Her skin shifted from gray-blue to pale pink. Her pulse steadied just slightly. Each breath of the ventilator pushed life back in. Outside the door, Alex pressed his forehead against the wall, fists clenched. Every muffled voice from inside felt like a hammer in his chest. He whispered the same words again and again, as if she could hear him across the wall. "Hold on, sweetheart. Please, just a little longer." Meanwhile, Ethan sank onto a bench inside the clinic, his coat dripping melted snow. His arms felt empty after handing Bella and the pups to the staff, but his heart refused to rest. He watched as they lifted Bella onto a steel table, slipping IV lines into her leg. The vet's voice was calm but urgent. "She's dehydrated, severely exhausted. We'll need fluids immediately. Keep monitoring her breathing." The pups were placed into small heated incubators lined with soft cloth. Two stirred weakly, curling together in the warmth. But the smallest one, the one Ethan had carried against his chest, lay frighteningly still. "Temp is too low," a technician said, frowning as she read the monitor. "Barely detectable." Ethan pushed himself forward, palms pressed flat on the glass of the incubator. "Do something?" he said, his voice raw. "We're trying," the vet assured, slipping tiny drops of warm glucose into the pup's mouth, rubbing its sides to stimulate breathing. Ethan's throat tightened. He pressed his forehead against the glass, whispering the same words he had said in the storm. "Breathe, little one. Don't give up." Bella let out a faint groan from the table. Her head rolled toward the sound of her pups. Even in her weakness, her eyes searched until she spotted them in their box. A low whine slipped from her throat. She wanted to stand to go to them, but her body betrayed her. "She's fighting for them," the vet murmured. "She held on long enough to keep them alive. Now we have to keep her alive." Hours passed like minutes. At the hospital, alarms shrieked suddenly. The girl's heartbeat slowed dangerously, dipping close to nothing. Doctors moved instantly, adjusting fluids, increasing oxygen, massaging her chest. "Stay with us," one nurse shouted. Alex, hearing the commotion through the doors, dropped to his knees in the hallway. His hands clasped tight as he prayed to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. At the clinic, the smallest pup went limp again. The monitor beeped frantically, showing no breath. Ethan stood frozen, his chest hollowing out. No, please." The technician rubbed the pup harder, trying to force life into its fragile lungs. She leaned down, breathing tiny puffs of air into its mouth. Nothing. Ethan's vision blurred. For a second, in both places, silence pressed heavy. It felt like the world had chosen to steal both child and pup away at the same time. Then a shift. At the hospital, the machine beeped steadily again. The girl's chest rose under the ventilator. Her heart found a rhythm, slow but steady. The doctor exhaled, shoulders sagging. "We've got her back." One nurse smiled faintly. "Colors improving, she's fighting." Outside the door, Alex collapsed into the chair, his face buried in his hands. Relief poured through him so fiercely, he trembled. At the clinic, the pup twitched under the technician's hands. Once, then again. Its chest rose in a weak gasp. Then another. Ethan pressed his forehead harder to the glass, tears breaking free. "Yes, that's it. Keep going." The tiny creature coughed once, then let out the faintest squeak. The technician grinned, wrapping it tighter in the heated cloth. "We've got life. He's still with us." Bella lifted her head again, her eyes finding Ethan's. He stepped closer, hand resting gently on her paw. "They're safe," he whispered. "You did it." By dawn, the storm outside had eased, but inside both the hospital and the clinic, the storms of the night had left their marks. The girl lay wrapped in heated blankets, her breathing steady under the mask. Machines hummed around her, but her body had begun the long climb back to safety. Doctors spoke more quietly now, their urgency softened into cautious hope. Bella lay resting, fluids running through her veins, her chest rising in steadier rhythm. The pups nestled close in their incubators, tiny bodies twitching in sleep. The smallest one stirred at last, wriggling weakly toward its siblings. Ethan sat nearby, head in his hands, relief pouring out in heavy breaths. 2 places, 2 battles, both nearly lost, both won by the smallest margins. For Alex and Ethan, miles apart but bound by the night, it was the same revelation: life is fragile, but life also fights. The girl had clawed back from the edge of death. The pup had taken its first breath again, and both had been saved not just by doctors and machines, but by a dog who had refused to give up, and by 2 men who had refused to walk away. The storm finally broke by dawn. Snow still blanketed the city in white silence, but the wind had softened the air calmer, as if the world itself had taken a long breath after a night spent holding it in. Inside the hospital and the small veterinary clinic, light began to spill through the windows, pale gold against the harsh white walls. Alex had not slept. He sat in a hard chair outside the girl's room, his head leaning against the wall, eyes half closed, but always pulling open again when a nurse passed by. Hours earlier, he had been told the words that kept echoing in his mind. She's stable. She's going to make it. The sound of a door opening pulled him up. A doctor stepped out, removing his mask. His face, tired but softer now, carried good news. She's out of danger, the doctor said quietly. It'll be a long recovery, but she'll live. Relief hit Alex like a wave. He sagged back against the wall, his chest rising sharply, his eyes burning. He nodded, unable to find words, only managing a hoarse "thank you." When he was finally allowed inside, the sight nearly undid him. The girl lay on the bed, wrapped in thick blankets. Her skin had regained a faint color. Machines still hummed, a mask still covered her nose and mouth. But the steady rhythm of her breathing was unmistakable. And then her eyes fluttered. Slowly, like shutters stiff with frost, they opened. For a moment she looked confused, her gaze flicking from the ceiling to the unfamiliar machines. Then she noticed Alex standing there. Her eyes widened with fear. She shrank slightly under the blanket, small hands trembling as if unsure whether to trust the stranger near her bed. Alex stepped back quickly, raising his palms. "It's okay," he said gently. His voice was low, careful, like speaking to a bird ready to fly. "You're safe now. You're in the hospital." Her lips moved under the mask, though no words came. Her eyes glistened with tears. A nurse hurried in, smiling softly. "Emma," she said, speaking her name for the first time. "That's your name, isn't it? You're safe now, Emma." The sound of her own name seemed to calm the girl. She blinked slowly, her eyes closing again, exhaustion pulling her back to sleep. But the moment had been enough. She had opened her eyes. She was alive. Alex pressed a hand to his chest, whispering to himself. "Emma." The name felt like sunlight after a night too long. Across town, Ethan sat slouched in a chair, his hair damp, his clothes still heavy from melted snow. He hadn't left the waiting area all night. Through the glass wall of the treatment room, he had watched every movement, the fluids flowing into Bella's veins, the gentle hands of the staff rubbing warmth into the pups, the weak breaths that had become stronger with each hour. Now, as morning light poured into the clinic, the scene had changed. Bella lay curled on a thick blanket, an IV still in place. But her eyes open, following every sound. Her breathing was steady, no longer ragged. And in the incubator, the three pups wriggled together. The two stronger ones bumped against each other, their tiny paws pressing clumsily at the glass. The smallest, the one Ethan had carried against his chest through the storm, had begun to stir with more energy. Its tiny head lifted for the first time, mouth opening in a squeak that filled the room with hope. One of the technicians opened the incubator, lifting the pups gently onto the floor near their mother. Their legs wobbled, their movements clumsy, but they nosed toward Bella at once. She lowered her head, licking them weakly, gathering them close as though claiming them again. Ethan's chest tightened. He leaned forward in his chair, watching the pups squirm and tumble over one another. One tried to climb onto Bella's paw, another pushed against its sibling, their squeaks filling the quiet clinic with life. "They'll make it," the vet said, stepping beside Ethan. His smile was tired but real. "Last night was close, but they're strong. Even the little one." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. His voice broke when he finally spoke. "She saved them. She saved that girl, too. We just carried them here." The vet placed a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes carrying is enough. As the morning stretched, Alex called Ethan from the hospital. His voice shook, but with relief this time. She made it. The girl's name is Emma. She opened her eyes. Ethan closed his eyes, leaning back in the chair. A laugh slipped out, low and trembling. That's good. That's so good. Bella and the pups, they're going to make it too. For a long moment, neither spoke. They sat miles apart, each surrounded by different walls. But the silence between them was warm. Both had seen the brink of loss. Both had carried life back from it. And now, both felt the weight lifting. Later that morning, Ethan was allowed into the treatment room. Bella raised her head when he entered, her ears twitching. She looked older, worn, but her eyes held a steadiness that hadn't been there before. "Hey, girl," Ethan said softly, kneeling beside her. He ran a hand gently along her side, careful of the IV. She sighed, resting her head against his knee, her pups crawling over her belly. One pup yipped, tumbling awkwardly against his shoe. Ethan chuckled, scooping it into his hands. Its small tongue flicked against his thumb, its body warm. He pressed it close for a moment, his eyes stinging. "You're fighters, all of you." Across town, Alex sat at Emma's bedside as the nurse replaced her mask with a nasal tube. She stirred again, her eyes opening briefly. This time when she saw him, the fear in her gaze softened. He offered a small smile. "You're safe, Emma. We're all safe now." Her lips curved faintly, a flicker of trust passing across her face before she drifted back to sleep. By the end of that morning, both Alex and Ethan finally allowed themselves to rest. For the first time since the storm had trapped them in its grip, they knew survival was not just a fragile hope, it was a reality. Emma lived. Bella lived. The 3 pups lived. And in the tired hearts of 2 men, hope itself lived too. The quiet of the hospital hallway broke when hurried footsteps echoed against the tiles. The doors swung open, and a woman stumbled inside, her breath ragged, her scarf half fallen from her shoulders. Her eyes were wide, wild, searching, as if her whole soul had been torn loose and scattered. "Where is she? Where's my daughter?" Her voice cracked with panic. A nurse hurried to intercept, but the woman pushed forward, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, a man, perhaps a neighbor or relative, tried to calm her, but she shook him off. "Emma," she cried, her voice shaking the walls. Alex rose from his chair, stunned by the raw desperation in her voice. He knew instantly this was Emma's mother, Sarah. A nurse guided her quickly toward the room, speaking gently. "She's here. She's safe now. Please come with me." Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched the doorway. And then she saw her daughter lying in the bed, wrapped in blankets, color faintly returning to her cheeks. The mask covered her face. The machines hummed, but she was alive. Sarah let out a sound that was neither sob nor laugh, but something in between. She rushed forward, falling to her knees at the bedside. Her hands brushed Emma's face, stroked her hair, pressed against her chest, as if to reassure herself her child still breathed. Tears poured freely, her shoulders shaking. "My baby. Oh God, my baby." Emma stirred faintly, her eyes opening for a brief moment. She blinked, confusion clouding her gaze, but when she saw the familiar face above her, she relaxed. Her lips curved in the faintest smile beneath the oxygen tube. "Mom," she whispered, barely audible. The word broke Sarah completely. She bowed her head onto the blankets, sobbing with relief, clutching Emma's hand like she would never let go again. The nurse stepped back, allowing the reunion to happen in silence. Alex stood frozen, his chest heavy. He had carried Emma from the snow, felt her breath slipping in and out, convinced she might never wake again. Now, watching mother and daughter cling to each other, he felt something crack open inside him. A release of fear, of guilt, of the cold that had pressed into his bones all night. He wiped at his face quickly, not caring who saw. Ethan arrived not long after, exhausted from his own vigil at the clinic. His eyes were red, his coat smelled faintly of disinfectant and wet fur. He stepped into the doorway just as Sarah pulled Emma into her arms again. For a moment, he simply watched. The raw humanity of it, the reunion between mother and child, struck deeper than any words could. He felt his throat tighten, and he swallowed hard, glancing at Alex. "She made it," Alex said softly, his voice still thick. Ethan nodded, stepping forward. So did Bella. And the pups. Relief washed through Alex's tired features, and for the first time since the storm began, the two friends allowed themselves a small, tired smile. Sarah turned, then noticing them for the first time. Her eyes were swollen with tears, but gratitude shone through them like light-breaking cloud. She stood slowly, brushing her daughter's hair back, and faced the two men. You saved her." Her voice trembled with both awe and disbelief. "I don't know how to thank you." Alex shook his head quickly, hands lifting as if to deflect the words. "We just found her. The dog Bella, she kept her alive. We only carried her here." Sarah blinked. The dog Ethan nodded. "A German shepherd. Thin, weak, but she'd wrapped herself around Emma. 3 puppies, too. She must have shielded them all night." Sarah's lips parted, her tears welling fresh. She pressed a hand to her chest as though the image itself pierced her. "She protected my child. A stranger's child. She nearly died doing it," Ethan added softly. "But she fought to the end. Just like Emma." Sarah covered her face, shaking her head in wonder. Then she lowered her hands and looked at them again. "You stayed. You didn't walk away. Whatever happens now, please know, you'll always be part of our story." Her words settled heavy and warm in their hearts. For Alex and Ethan, who had fought through the storm with nothing but instinct and desperation, it felt like the first real acknowledgement of what had happened. Later, when Sarah sat quietly at Emma's side, humming softly while her daughter slept again, Alex and Ethan stepped into the hallway. The air felt easier now, but both men carried questions that would not leave them. Bella, Alex said quietly, "Where did she come from? She wasn't just some stray." Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. She had the look of a trained dog. Even half-starved, she knew what to do, how to shield, how to keep them alive. "You think she belonged to someone, maybe? Or maybe she'd been lost for weeks. But dogs like her don't just vanish without a story." Alex nodded slowly. The image of Bella pressed around Emma, her body curved like a wall against the cold, burned itself deeper into his mind. It was more than instinct. It was choice. And that choice deserved to be understood. Hours later, as the hospital quieted into late morning, Alex and Ethan prepared to leave. Sarah insisted they write down their numbers. "I'll never forget your faces," she told them. "But I want to thank you again properly when my daughter is stronger." Alex hesitated, then nodded. "We'll check on her. And on Bella." Sarah tilted her head. "Bella. That's what we started calling her," Ethan explained. It felt right. Sarah smiled faintly, the name soft on her tongue. "Bella. Beautiful. It suits her." As the two men walked back into the snowy street, the relief of survival pressed against the deeper, unsettled weight in their hearts. Emma had been saved, yes. Bella and her pups, too. But the story wasn't over. Somewhere behind Bella's tired eyes lay a history they didn't yet know, and neither man could shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. It was 2 days later when Sarah sat at Emma's bedside, her daughter's small hand wrapped in hers. Emma had slept most of the time, waking only in fragile moments, but every hour she grew a little stronger. Alex and Ethan visited often, carrying updates from the clinic where Bella and her pups were recovering. On this morning, though, Emma stirred with unusual energy. She blinked up at her mother, then at Alex and Ethan, who had just arrived. Her lips moved slowly, voice still weak, but clear enough to be heard. "Mom, the dog." Sarah leaned closer. "Bella, she's safe, sweetheart. She and her puppies are resting." Emma shook her head faintly. "No. Before, in the snow." She paused to take a breath, her eyes shining with a fragile clarity. She dug something out. A chain, a collar. She showed me." Sarah frowned gently, smoothing her daughter's hair. A collar. Alex exchanged a glance with Ethan. Both men leaned closer, intent. Emma lifted her hand weakly, tracing the air as though remembering. It was old, red leather. A tag. She dropped it in my lap before she curled around me. Her small voice faltered, but the memory had returned enough to leave her trembling. "I think she wanted me to keep it safe." Sarah pressed a kiss to Emma's forehead, whispering, "It's okay. We'll find it." Later that day, Alex and Ethan returned to the park with Sarah. The storm had left deep drifts, and though the sky was clear now, the snow still lay heavy, muffling the world in silence. They trudged back to the oak tree where they had first found Bella and Emma. Ethan dropped to his knees, scraping through the snow where Bella had dug. His fingers hit something hard. He pulled out a strip of worn red leather, stiff with frost, a small tag dangling from the ring. He brushed away the ice, revealing the engraving. "Bella. Property of James Peterson. Search and Rescue Unit." The three of them stared in silence. "Search and rescue," Alex whispered. His chest tightened as the pieces fell together. Ethan turned the tag over, reading the faded phone number etched on the back. She wasn't just some stray. She was trained. She was doing exactly what she was made to do, saving lives. Sarah's hand covered her mouth, tears springing again. She saved my daughter because she was a rescuer all along. With the number in hand, Alex made the call. The line rang long before an elderly voice answered. "Hello, Mr. Peterson?" Alex asked cautiously. "My name is Alex. I think we found your dog." Silence fell heavy over the line. Then a shaky breath. "Bella, yes. A German shepherd. We found her in the park during the storm. She kept a little girl alive along with her own pups." The man's voice broke into sobs so sudden Alex had to hold the phone away for a moment. When Peterson returned, his words were rough. "I thought she was gone. Weeks ago, she disappeared during a training exercise. We searched everywhere. The snowstorms. I never thought." "She survived," Alex said gently. "And she saved lives." The next day, Peterson came to the clinic. He was a tall man despite his age, his coat hanging heavy on his shoulders, his eyes raw from sleepless nights. When Bella saw him, her ears twitched. She struggled up on unsteady legs, tail thumping weakly. "Bella girl," Peterson whispered, falling to his knees. Tears blurred his eyes as he pressed his hands into her fur. "You made it back." Bella pressed her muzzle into his chest, her body trembling with recognition. The pups squeaked nearby, and she glanced at them before returning her gaze to him as if introducing the new family she had protected. Peterson stroked her gently, his voice thick with pride and grief. She was part of the rescue unit, trained to find people in storms, avalanches, collapsed buildings. She never stopped. Even when she was lost, she kept doing her job. Ethan bent, resting his hand on Bella's back. She didn't just find Emma. She kept her alive. Peterson nodded slowly, tears running unchecked. "That's who she is. That's Bella. Sarah brought Emma to the clinic a week later, her small body still frail, but stronger. When she saw Bella, her eyes lit with recognition. She slipped from her mother's grasp, shuffling forward, until she could bury her face in Bella's fur. "You saved me," she whispered. Bella licked her cheek tail, wagging softly, her pups tumbling at Emma's feet. The room filled with a sound that had been missing for days: laughter. Small, fragile, but real. Alex stood back, watching the scene with a quiet smile. Ethan folded his arms, his eyes shining. Both men felt the same weight ease from their chests. The truth about Bella had been uncovered. She wasn't just a stray. She was a rescuer who had given everything, even when no one was watching. Later, as the group sat together in the clinic, Peterson told more stories of missions Bella had led, of lives she had pulled from wreckage and storms. Sarah listened, holding Emma close. Alex and Ethan exchanged glances, both humbled by the depth of the dog's history. "She isn't just a dog," Peterson said softly. "She's a hero. And now she has a new family too." Emma hugged one of the pups to her chest, smiling weakly, but with light in her eyes. "We'll take care of them," she said. Sarah kissed her daughter's hair, whispering, "Yes, we'll never forget." And for Alex and Ethan, standing in the quiet after the storm, the story of Bella no longer felt like chance. It was destiny. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and warm linens, a place built to hold both suffering and recovery. Sarah sat at Emma's bedside, reading softly from a children's book. Emma, still pale but stronger now, traced the pictures with her finger, while the 3 pups napped in a basket at her feet. Bella lay nearby on a blanket, her head resting on her paws, eyes half closed but watchful. The door creaked open. A tall figure stepped inside, shoulders stooped with age but posture still proud. Mr. Peterson's eyes went straight to Bella. For a moment he didn't speak, he simply removed his hat and pressed it to his chest. Bella's ears twitched. Her tail thumped softly against the floor. Recognition shone in her eyes. "Bella," Peterson whispered, his voice breaking. He took a slow step forward, as if afraid the vision might dissolve if he moved too quickly. Bella rose, though her legs trembled from weakness. She padded across the floor, pressing her muzzle into his hand. Peterson knelt, his hands sinking into her fur, his eyes filling with tears. "You're still the same girl," he murmured. "Still saving lives." Emma's eyes widened. She clutched her blanket and looked from Bella to the old man. "You know her," Peterson smiled through his tears. "Better than most. She used to be my partner." They gathered in the room, Sarah beside Emma, Alex leaning quietly in the corner, Ethan crouched near the pups. Peterson sat on the chair Bella pressed against his leg. He began to speak, his voice carrying the weight of years. Bella was part of the county's search and rescue unit. She trained for storms, floods, avalanches. Her nose could find a heartbeat buried under snow. Her strength could drag a grown man to safety. We went on missions together, dozens of them. She saved lives no one else could reach. Emma listened with wide eyes. Sarah squeezed her hand. Peterson's gaze softened as he looked at Bella. But a few months ago, during a winter exercise, she vanished. We searched for weeks. The storms kept coming, and I feared the worst. He sighed, shaking his head. I thought she was gone forever. Alex spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but steady. She wasn't gone. She was out there, still doing what she was trained to do. Ethan nodded. When we found Emma, Bella had built a wall of her body around her and the pups. She must have known no one was coming right away. She made herself the shelter. Peterson's eyes glistened. He stroked Bella's ear, his voice trembling. Even lost, even starving, her instinct was the same: protect, rescue, save. That's who she is. Emma leaned forward on the bed, her eyes fixed on Bella. She reached out her hand, and Bella moved closer, resting her chin gently on the child's blanket. Emma smiled faintly, her fingers brushing through the dog's fur. She stayed with me, Emma whispered. She didn't leave even when she was so tired. Peterson's throat worked as he swallowed hard. That's what strikes me most, he admitted. Dogs. They can wander home. She could have found her way back eventually, but she didn't. She chose to stay with a child she didn't know in a storm that could have killed her. Silence fell. The truth of his words pressed heavily on all of them. Ethan looked down at the pups, who had begun tumbling clumsily in their basket. And she didn't just protect Emma. She brought 3 new lives into the world, then guarded them too. Peterson nodded, pride and grief tangled in his expression. She's always been selfless. But this was more than duty. It was devotion. Sarah wiped her eyes, her voice unsteady. If not for her, my daughter wouldn't be here. You raised a hero, Mr. Peterson. The old man bowed his head. I trained her. But what she did, that was her heart. You can't train love like that. He reached down again, scratching Bella gently under the chin. She leaned into his touch, but her eyes drifted back to Emma as if drawn by an invisible thread. Peterson noticed. His lips curved in a sad, tender smile. She's telling me something without words. She's telling me she belongs here now. That little girl is her mission, and she won't walk away. Emma clung to Bella's fur as though afraid someone might take her away. Sarah bent to kiss her daughter's hair, whispering, "Don't worry. She isn't going anywhere." Later that afternoon, while Emma napped, Alex and Ethan stepped into the hallway with Peterson. The old man's steps were slow, but his voice carried strength. "I loved that dog," he said softly, "but watching her now, seeing where she chooses to be, I can't deny it. Her path has changed." Alex studied him carefully. "That can't be easy." Peterson shook his head. "No, but she's earned the right to choose. And if her choice is that little girl, then I'll honor it." Ethan crossed his arms, his gaze steady. "She saved Emma's life. Maybe that bond can't be broken." Peterson smiled faintly. "Dogs know hearts better than we do. Bella's heart has already chosen." That evening, when the lamps dimmed and the hospital grew quiet, Bella curled at the foot of Emma's bed. The pups had tired themselves out and were piled together in sleep, warm and safe. Emma stirred, half waking, and whispered one word into the hush, "Bella." The dog lifted her head, ears pricking, before lowering it again onto her paws, content. From his chair, Peterson watched, his eyes wet but peaceful. He had raised a rescuer, and she had found her greatest mission, not by command, not by training, but by choice. He leaned back, his voice soft in the dark. "You didn't come home because you already found one." Alex and Ethan, seated nearby, exchanged a glance. Both men felt the same weight of understanding. Bella wasn't just a survivor. She wasn't just a rescuer. She was family by her own decision. And in the quiet of that night, everyone knew it. It was in the quiet days that followed that Sarah finally spoke aloud, the thought that had been growing in her heart since the night of the storm. She sat beside Emma's hospital bed, stroking her daughter's hair, while Bella lay curled at their feet, the 3 puppies pressed against her side. Alex and Ethan were visiting, bringing fresh fruit and small toys to brighten the room. Mr. Peterson sat in the corner, his weathered hands resting on his cane, his eyes watching Bella with pride and sorrow. "Mr. Peterson," Sarah said gently, "I don't want to presume, but I can't imagine our lives without Bella now. She saved Emma's life. She watches her as if she's her own. And these puppies Emma lights up every time they stumble across the floor. They belong together." Peterson looked at Bella, then at Emma. The girl was giggling softly as a puppy chewed her blanket, her laughter the first real sound of joy in weeks. Bella's ears twitched, her gaze calm and steady, as if approving the scene. The old man's voice was low but steady. "You want to take them in?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, if you'd allow it. Bella's a hero, and she deserves a home where she's needed, loved every single day. Emma and I, we can give her that." There was silence, only broken by the squeaks of the pups tumbling over one another. Then Peterson smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. "Bella chose you the night she curled around your daughter. I'd be a fool to break that bond now. She belongs here with Emma, with you." Sarah's breath caught, and she whispered, "Thank you." From that day forward, Bella and her pups were no longer temporary patients. They were family. Peterson, though, remained close. He visited often, bringing treats and old photos of Bella during her days in the search and rescue unit. Emma loved hearing the stories wide-eyed as she listened to tales of collapsed buildings and avalanche rescues. "You mean she pulled people out of the snow all by herself?" Emma asked once. Peterson chuckled softly. "Not all by herself. She had me. But truth be told, she was the better half of the team." Bella wagged her tail at the sound of his voice, pressing her nose into his hand. It was a bond unbroken, even as she settled into her new home. When Emma was finally discharged from the hospital, the world outside looked different. Snow still covered the ground, but the storm had passed. Sarah helped her daughter into their small home, where a blanket-covered basket waited for Bella and the pups. The moment they stepped inside, Bella circled the room, inspecting each corner as if to make sure it was safe. Then she settled near the fireplace, her pups wriggling happily into the warmth. Emma laughed as one of them tried to climb her leg. "This one's the troublemaker," she declared. Ethan, crouching nearby, grinned. "Then you'd better name him something that fits." Emma thought for a moment. "Storm. Because he's always causing one." The name stuck instantly. The other two earned theirs soon after Snowdrop for the smallest, who still had a shy, gentle nature, and Shadow for the pup that followed Bella's every move. Days slipped into a new rhythm. Each morning, Emma sat on the rug laughing as the pups tumbled over one another. Sarah watched from the kitchen, her heart lighter each time her daughter's cheeks flushed with joy. Bella kept close watch, always lying nearby, eyes soft but alert. If Emma grew tired and drifted to sleep on the sofa, Bella would rise, circle once, and lie down at her feet, her body curved protectively. One afternoon, Peterson visited and stood silently in the doorway, watching Emma chase Storm clumsily across the living room. Bella lay stretched on the rug, her head high, her gaze following every movement with calm satisfaction. Peterson's eyes shone. "Look at her. She's at peace. She's found her place." Alex leaned against the doorframe, nodding. "It's like she knows her mission isn't rescue anymore. It's family." The biggest change was Emma herself. Fear had haunted her eyes after the storm shadows that no medicine could erase. But now, surrounded by fur and laughter, those shadows began to fade. She smiled more often, her laughter bubbling out when the pups wrestled or when Bella's tail knocked a vase off the table. One evening, as she leaned against Bella's side, she whispered, "You're my best friend." Bella pressed her nose gently into the girl's shoulder, a silent answer. Sarah, watching from the doorway, felt tears sting her eyes. She whispered to herself, "Thank you, Bella. You gave me my daughter back." Peterson continued to visit weekly. He brought toys for the pups, old leashes, and sometimes photos from Bella's working years. Each time, Bella greeted him warmly, but always returned to Emma's side. "She loves me still," Peterson said once, stroking Bella's ear. "But she's chosen her path, and I couldn't be prouder." Ethan grinned. "You're part of this family, too. Don't think you're leaving her behind." The old man chuckled. "I'll hold you to that." One late afternoon, golden light filled the living room. Emma lay on the rug, Storm tugging at her sleeve. Snowdrop curled in her lap, Shadow perched awkwardly on Bella's back. The girl's laughter rang out pure and unbroken. Bella watched with calm eyes, her chest rising in steady rhythm, her tail thumping lazily. Sarah snapped a photo on her phone, capturing the scene, a little girl wrapped in sunlight and fur. A mother dog watching with contentment, 3 pups scattering joy across the room. It was a picture of healing, of survival, of something stronger than both belonging. Alex and Ethan sat quietly on the porch that evening, listening to Emma's laughter through the open window. The air was crisp but gentle, a far cry from the storm that had nearly stolen everything. "Feels like a different world," Alex murmured. Ethan nodded. "Because it is. That storm ended one family's nightmare and built a new one in its place." They sat in silence, each carrying the same thought. None of them would ever forget the night Bella had chosen to stay. And now, every laugh, every wagging tail, every smile from Emma proved that choice had created a family. Inside, Bella lifted her head, her gaze sweeping across the room. She saw Emma's joy, the pups' play, Sarah's smile. Her eyes softened, and she let out a long sigh full of contentment. For the first time in weeks, she felt no need to be vigilant, no pressing duty pulling her into the storm. She was home,